Nobody's down here. Nobody's holding down the low end. Don't feel like you have to follow a rule book. Iron Maiden almost never do. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Low End University. Today I'm hearing Iron Maiden's Phantom of the Opera for the first time, and that's from their self-titled debut album released in 1980. And as I've said before, there's only about 2 Maiden records I'm really familiar with, Number of the Beast being one of them. So going back to their very first album is brand new territory for me. And until the passing of Paul Di'Anno just last year, may he rest in peace, I had no idea anybody besides Bruce Dickinson ever sang for this band. I don't know much about their early history, so hearing someone else on vocals will be an interesting listen because Bruce is all I've ever known. But most importantly, I'm curious to hear what a very young Steve Harris is doing on bass on their first album across the 7-minute song that many of you have been requesting. So without further ado, let's dive into Phantom of the Opera from Iron Maiden. Right into it. We have liftoff. Woo. Woo. Okay, before that little intro motif gets lost in the past, because we have liftoff, as I said, I love this little beginning motif they've introduced. It feels very much like a classical etude. Just the way that kind of fermata, that pause happens, that they land on that B, I believe that was a B. Sounds like we're here in B minor, somewhere close to there. But that kind of establishes the tonic and the way they just let that riff breathe. Like the conductor's just, it's a fermata, right? They repeat it several times. I love that setup. Again, it just has a very symphonic type of feel to it. Yeah. So. And I kind of like how it doesn't keep going up because there's a lot of little movement. It sounds like some triplets. Could have gone up, but there's something emphatic about going down to that. Just breathing on that bottom note. Cool setup. They're in unison here. Wow. Up to E now, very triplet based. Even on the earlier albums, that's kind of a staple of their the riff writing. And we're going to get into the same debate again. Steve Harris using 3 fingers or 2 fingers. I really just believe he used 2. I feel like I've gotten into that topic on every video. And it's cool just because their triplet-based writing, it just makes the 2-finger plucking even harder. But even on the other tracks I reviewed, Power Slave, To Tame a Land, it's a very signature thing Iron Maiden does in terms of rhythmic, how they structure their riffs rhythmically. Okay, up here in E now, up a whole step. Huh. And one thing they also do is they do what's called planing with minor or major chords. I'm going to say Iron Maiden uses a lot more minor chords, but planing means taking one chord and just moving it somewhere else, regardless of the key signature or any rules with music theory. So even if that chord goes out of key, it doesn't matter. It's planing. And what they're doing here is planing that minor third arpeggio they're doing, or I would just say interval. So up to the minor third on E. Going up a whole step. I think they went up a half step up to G. So E minor, F sharp minor, and G minor, none of those are in the same key. So they're just ignoring anything about the key or the tonal center. And it gives it that kind of jarring suspenseful, brooding type of sound, like something bad's about to happen. So that's been present on much later songs I've done. So this must have been like a core part of their songwriting. I don't know if Steve Harris has always written a lot of the music, but if so, that's something he tends to repeat. So already in the technical world, triplets, relentless. Let's keep it going. Okay. That's clever. We take that intro riff, go somewhere else. You almost forget about it because everything else has been so technical. The harmonies, jumping around, minor chords, all the things we've been playing. They bring back that intro and kind of bridge it together with the B riff. I'm interested to get into the vocals here too because he sounds like he's got a high voice like Bruce. That 80s kind of rock singer thing, especially that kind of yell he did a little bit back here when that riff started. So cool setup so far. Bass playing is relentless. No stopping. And the way the vocals come in and do a unison with it is particularly cool because that doesn't sound like a very natural thing to sing. So I didn't expect that pairing, but it's a cool effect. It just drives home the way the song was set up. And one thing I want to say too about theory, if you guys have been watching me long enough, I talk a lot about theory, and I want to reiterate that as an old professor once told me, music theory is descriptive. It should never be prescriptive. It's always worth reminding people of this because sometimes when I talk about theory, I get comments like, I don't understand it. It seems kind of like it's going over my head, or it's this rule book I kind of have to abide by. And you can clearly hear that here in this first 90 seconds, Iron Maiden are not abiding by the typical rules of music theory. So I'm going back later and just understanding what they did. I'm describing it. Theory is fun and useful to go back and understand how or why. It doesn't really dictate what you have to do. So just a reminder there that if it sounds good to you, that's the only criteria you need. Don't ever forget that. So it's just a good way to understand how they're breaking the rules or how they're following them. Just worth mentioning there. Let's keep it going because this is relentless, as I said. Kind of getting it. It's thick. Knee-jerk change up here. Don't think that was a whole tempo change, but certainly establishing a whole different feel than where we've been. Little bit, okay. Almost tapped into like Queen for a second there. I have to say, vocalist sounds really cool. I mean, this is my first time hearing Paul Di'Anno, and it sucks that he passed away just very recently. I think it was October of last year. I was reading. I I haven't heard the full range of his voice yet. I'm sure we'll get there. But this field change is really interesting, and I'm thinking about how, I don't want to say bizarre this production is, but you'll notice there's a very busy hi-hat part happening, but it's mixed really quietly. And I think if that were louder and really matching the volume of Steve's bass, it would be a whole different dynamic play coming across. And I like that you have this palm-muted guitar, I think kind of doing something contrapuntal with the thing Steve's playing. Let me hear it again, but it's an interesting production choice here. It's almost kind of top-heavy. The bass is the loudest, and you have the guitar and the drums more mixed, a little quieter. So it has this really punchy bass-driven sound. Yeah, just listen how quiet the hi-hat is. It's kind of more of a washy sound, but it's there. Okay, guitar and bass are in unison. Yeah, it's kind of Queen, isn't it? And another thing that's worth mentioning here is that when you palm mute guitar like that, especially when you pull back on the drive a bit, the notes tend to become a bit bassier. And it's a really cool writing technique when you take a guitar part and you palm mute it really heavily. You kind of get that wolfiness out of it. Then you mirror it with a bass line, and it almost makes the bass line more of the dominant melodic figure. It just makes it really punchy. And I like how the two are working together here, but it sounds like they're in unison. There's no deviation from either. We're just going between E, D, and C, root, fifth, octave. There's a lot of Maiden songs in C, D, and E hovering around those chords. I am familiar enough with that. Back to it. Okay, obvious slowdown now. Woo! That sounded like it jumped into a whole different song, just on a dime. Big rock epic, kind of rock opera feel now. Okay, a lot of surprises. Now we're in like a shuffle. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, a waltz. Woo. You know, I don't think I've ever heard that particular sound from Maiden. I've heard a good bit of Maiden. Again, mostly those two records, some outlier songs from the 80s and 90s, but not enough considering how large their discography is. I think anything after the year 2000, haven't heard it. I would love to review some of their newer stuff, so please let me know in the comments. I will go through them and exclusively pick my next Iron Maiden song, but I want to hear something later. Any of the newer stuff, but nonetheless, I don't think I've heard that type of sound from them. It's a bit bluesy. That's interesting. And let me just go back and hear it again. I really like how Steve is holding down a rock solid bass line. He's obviously changing with the way the song changed, getting a bit more relaxed, not so busy, but he's still jumping up and doing some fills that seem to augment what's going on in the guitar solo. Tasty. Dump. That F natural's interesting sound. It really colors the progression. We've largely been in E minor, a lot of F sharp and such. They're throwing that F major in there. Then right back to E minor, which has the F sharp in there. So I love the color they're adding. Again, they're just kind of throwing in an out of key chord. Why? Because it maybe sounded good. That's the moral of the story I always try to get across when I hear stuff like that. Don't feel like you have to follow a rule book. Iron Maiden almost never do. Hasn't stopped them, has it? Okay. That chord. I love the, I just feel it. I love that. Cool. I love when Steve just jumps up and is a guitar part. Somebody has to be on bass, but he's certainly not playing your typical bass parts, and that's just what has made him such a pioneer of lead bass and just bass lines cutting through and being up front. Starting a passage with bass up high. Nobody's down here. Nobody's holding down the low end. You don't need to in Iron Maiden's music. And they have just normalized that. And I just love that any bass part could easily be a guitar part. I don't know about vice versa, but I'm going to at least say the front way. So we started out here with, it almost feels like a reprise of what was going on earlier. We're in the same tonal center, E, D, and C, because we've largely been there. And they kind of foreshadowed a bit in the... Taking it up an octave with a new part, but it still feels familiar, outlining the same three chords. And this, again, feels very classical, very etude-ish. Where does that start? I feel like he has got a bit of chorus on the tone. And I don't get to hear his tone isolated a ton. Very brief, quick spots in other songs. And this is, of course, the first record, but I hear a bit of that. It almost sounds like a bit of that analog tape saturation, but maybe a bit of chorus. I'm sure one of you will know. And he's not outlining your typical arpeggio. It sounds like 1-4-5. And that's tough to do because you have to bar a fourth. So it's both up here on fret 14, but I think he's not letting them ring together at all. So what's tough about a position like that is if you bar it, so 14-14 all on the index finger, you get that little bit of ringing together that can make the part just not translate quite like it is here. I would probably fret it like one finger per note type of thing instead of barring it, because you get a little bit of that. And his sound very separated. So that's something worth knowing too. Fourth positions on fingerboards are incredibly annoying because it's very tough to just do a... So it's good to just use one finger per note. And it sounds like he's just moving that position down, D and C, and back up. Just raking. And I love how the guitar is a true counterpoint here. It's very etude-ish, kind of a countering melody. It sounds like the guitar is actually outlining the third major minor, doing more of a... So the harmonies created there are very cool. Let's see how this unfolds. Is that another guitar or another bass layer? You hear that little new melody creeping in that's really driving the tension? Oh, that was subtle. I didn't hear that the first time. Either way, it's sexy. Now Steve's sort of doing a lower octave iteration. It's like he's taken out the changing notes and doing more of a, but slower. So he's going back into his territory. I guess the entire fretboard's really his territory, for being honest. But taking it down low, going back to a bass appropriate. And that little tag he did almost sounded like that little bit from the intro. A little bit of a riff callback to that. It's just, I can't get over how classical this is. Yeah. You know, when they play this live, they got to really be watching each other, because this is probably the fourth time now where it's just been a knee-jerk on a dime. They got to look at each other and go, we on the same page here? Because that can easily be a train wreck. Another iteration. And also, where have the vocals been? I didn't even realize they hadn't been in the first, or I'd say the last few minutes. This definitely has that younger ambition with the songwriting. Like, let's cram a lot of riffs in. And now that I'm hearing one of the earliest recordings Steve Harris has played on, unless there was something pre-Iron Maiden, but either way, he's in his early 20s here. He still sounds like Steve in the sense that his bass lines have always reminded me of like an arpeggiator on a synth. Like, we all know that sound. A modern synth, you just press one note and hold it, and it arpeggiates within that chord. It goes, and his bass lines are just, they remind me of that. They're busy. They never sit in one spot for too long, and they're always outlining the chord in a really creative way. They almost just kind of have this... I mean, he plays a lot like that, when most bass players would just go... So I love how just the busyness of his bass lines throughout the Maiden music I've heard are largely responsible for the energy. And they often go so well with the drum parts, because I actually don't find the drums to be that busy. They're really holding down that... And of course they do a drum fill, but it's like he's just painting in notes within the drum beat. And I just love the rhythm section work. It's very unique, and how he comes underneath the other guitar parts and the riffs and just adds so much dimension to them. Let's play this out. This has been a pretty epic journey through different riffs and feels. And some of it's been a bit jarring, but some of it's felt very thought out and clever and natural, especially with the way they're reprising some of their own riffs from earlier. Cool stuff. Pretty regal. Okay, back to that. And that riff is really one of the most static riffs I've really heard him play. And of course, stuff like the Trooper, Number the Beast, he kind of rides on one note, but even if he's not doing the arpeggiating thing, there's no whole notes. There's a lot of black ink on the page if I were to, transcribe a Steve Harris part. He's a very subdivided player. Always subdividing. And just subdividing something can mean the difference between a low energy song and a high energy one. So they're coming back to this riff to close it out. But that last part was really epic. Just the solo section, the nice walk back down to the one and a minor key. It's an epic sound, almost like a concert closer finale. They're the vocals. Woo! So the song seemed to end almost in reverse to the way it started. They brought back that little unison classical thing I was talking about. The song almost ended like a mirror image of itself. So that's why songwriting for their younger years. But thanks again to all of you who have requested Phantom of the Opera. It was really great to go back and hear the humble beginnings of Iron Maiden, even though there was nothing really humble about it. They were still ripping. I mean, Steve had his style figured out, cemented, and arguably mastered from the first album. But again, let me know in the comments what later era Maiden songs I should come back and do next. And if you'd like to support this channel further, please come find us over on Patreon. I do full albums every month. We vote on them. It's a blast. Lots of bass lessons, music theory lessons, and just a community that's really growing, and I'm very grateful for it. I would love to have you come join us. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you're subscribed. I love you all, and we'll see you next time.